This story is titled, I Secretly Paid Off My Brother's $47,000 Debt. He became a fake financial guru. When he almost destroyed our family with bad advice, I stood up at a party and showed everyone the receipts. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Story Zone. If you are new here, hit subscribe because we find the stories that make you feel things you did not expect to feel. Today's story is different from our usual ones. There's pettiness in it, yes. There's a public confrontation and a lawsuit and a moment at a party that made an entire room go silent. But underneath all of that, it is really a story about two siblings and the invisible weights they have been carrying for each other their whole lives without ever once just saying so. Let's get into it. OP starts by saying, I need to tell this from the very beginning because if I start in the middle you are going to think my brother is the villain of this story. And the truth is more complicated than that. Tyler is not a villain. He is a golden child who was handed a mythology and ran with it too far, and I am the person who handed it to him and then spent 3 years watching what I had created and not knowing what to do about it. So we are starting at the beginning. All the way at the beginning. My name is Sarah. I am 34 years old. I work in corporate finance. I analyze numbers for a living, which means I am constitutionally incapable of pretending that numbers say something other than what they say, which will become very relevant. I have an apartment I like, a cat named Fig, and a gym habit I maintain out of spite rather than enjoyment. I am not particularly warm on the surface. I have been told I come across as competent in a way that can feel like judgment. I have been working on that. I also had a small business that went under 4 years ago, an event planning company I had built over 6 years and was genuinely proud of. It was not failing, it was growing until a silent business partner pulled out without warning and took her client connections with her, which took the cash flow, which took everything else in a chain reaction I could not stop fast enough. I tried for 8 months to save it. I could not. I closed it cleanly. My family was sympathetic in the way that families are when they are also quietly relieved it was not them. They said the right things and then filed it away as a data point they would use later in ways they did not realize they were doing. Sarah's business failed. Not mean. Not malicious. Just a fact they kept in a drawer somewhere. Around the same time my relationship ended. David and I had been together 4 years and the business collapse had put a pressure on us that neither of us fully admitted to until it was too late. He was patient. We both tried. But some strains do not resolve, they just accumulate, and by the time the business was done the relationship was too. We parted honestly and I was devastated anyway. The way you are devastated by things that are nobody's fault. I say all of this because it matters for what comes later. For why a specific sentence at a specific party felt the way it felt. But I am not there yet. Tyler is my brother. 4 years younger than me, which made him 30 when this story starts. The best way I know how to describe Tyler is this: he is the person at any gathering that you are glad is there. He has a quality I genuinely do not possess and have always quietly envied. A warmth that is immediate and effortless and makes people feel within minutes that he has known them forever and likes them specifically. He is funny without trying too hard. He remembers details about people. Their kids' names, their hobbies, the trip they mentioned 6 months ago. He is on a purely social level a genuinely wonderful person to be around. He is also, and I say this with love and from 29 years of evidence, someone who has never once had to face a consequence that someone did not cushion for him first. My parents loved Tyler with a specific intensity one recognized early and learned to navigate rather than resent. It was not that they did not love me. They did. But Tyler was the one they worried about, and worry in some families functions as a form of love that crowds everything else out. I was the one who would be fine, who was always fine. Tyler was the one who needed watching, and so he was watched, and caught when he fell, and handed soft landings when the fall was inevitable, and grew up understanding, at some level that probably never became fully conscious, that the world had a particular cushion in it where he was concerned. The credit card debt had been accumulating for years. I found out the full extent of it not because Tyler told me but because I happened to see a statement once, sitting on the counter at my parents' house in a moment of carelessness. $47,000 across 4 cards, minimum payments, interest accumulating monthly like a tide coming in that he was trying to bail out with a teaspoon. I did what I do when I see a problem I know how to solve. I solved it. Not immediately, not impulsively. I sat with it for 2 months first, running the numbers, thinking about how to do it without Tyler knowing it was me. Because I knew with the certainty that comes from 29 years of knowing someone that Tyler would never accept help from his older sister. Not from the one who was always fine. His pride would not survive that. So I built the cover story. I researched what legitimate debt forgiveness programs looked like. The language, the documentation, the kind of official-looking letters that would make the whole thing feel like something that came from a system rather than from a person. I structured the payments through a third-party service in a way that would show up in his statements as an external resolution. I made it look exactly like what I told him it was. A program. Something impersonal. Something he had qualified for, not something he had been given. The $47,000 came from savings I had rebuilt after the business closed. Not my emergency fund. But it was real money. Money I had accumulated carefully over 2 years of living lean. I did not let myself think too long about what it represented. I just sent it. I told no one. Not my parents, not my best friend. Not anyone. I filed it away the way I file most things I have decided do not require ongoing management. Completely. For a while it worked exactly the way I hoped. Tyler got the letter from the program. He called me, excited and relieved in a way I had not heard from him in years. He talked about how it felt like a sign, like something shifting, like the experience had made him think differently about money and choices and what he wanted to build going forward. I listened and said all the right things and felt, quietly, like I had done something genuinely good. I thought, now he has a foundation. Now he can build something real on stable ground. The crisis is behind him. He can grow. What I did not anticipate was that Tyler would take the experience of having his debt mysteriously disappear and construct from it a personal transformation narrative so thorough and so convincing that he would eventually believe every word of it himself. It started with the blog. About 6 months after the debt was resolved, Tyler launched a personal finance blog. From debt to discipline, his words, his brand, his logo he had clearly spent real time designing. He wrote about the journey, the discipline, the system he had developed for managing money. He wrote about hitting rock bottom and clawing his way back. He wrote with a conviction and specificity that would have been completely credible to anyone who did not know that the rock bottom he was describing had been quietly removed by his older sister. I told myself it was harmless. He was processing the experience in his own way. The specifics of how the debt got resolved were not really the point. He had changed his habits, which was real, and he was writing about the emotional journey, which was also real. I talked myself out of saying anything. Then came the YouTube channel. Thumbnail of Tyler pointing at a graph with a look of intense significance. Video titles like The 3 Things That Kept Me in Debt and How I Eliminated $47K Without Filing for Bankruptcy. He was posting twice a week. He was growing. The comments were full of people who found his story relatable and his advice helpful. He was charming on camera in exactly the way he was charming in person. Warm, specific, funny without trying too hard. I watched a few videos. They were good. That was almost the worst part. He was genuinely engaging, genuinely helpful in some of his advice, genuinely connecting with people who needed what he was offering. He had taken a fictional story and used it to build something that was producing real value for real people. Except for the part where the foundation was a lie. I said nothing. I told myself his good habits are real. His growth is real. The advice about budgeting and spending is sound. The origin story is embellished, but the destination is legitimate. I repeated this enough times that I almost believed it. Then he charged my sister $200 for a consultation. My sister Emma called me laughing, which is the only reason I found out. She said Tyler had set up an official consultation service and she had paid for a session mostly to be supportive and it had been fine. I laughed too on the phone with Emma. When I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time not laughing. He was monetizing it now. The fictional journey had become a product. And the product was being sold to our family first, which meant our family was the first group of people who would end up paying in one way or another for a credential that had never been earned. But the thing that broke the seal completely, that made me pick up the phone and call my parents, was the book. Tyler announced it in the family group chat with the energy of someone who has been waiting to share something for weeks. A publisher, small but real, had expressed interest in a memoir-style personal finance book. From Debt to Discipline: How I Paid Off $47,000 and Built a Life Worth Living. He had a tentative deal. He was going to write it over the next year. He was, and I am quoting directly from his message, living proof that anyone can turn it around if they commit to the process. I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I drove to my parents' house. I sat down with my mother and father at their kitchen table and told them everything. I showed them the bank statements. I showed them the transfer confirmations. I showed them the paper trail I had kept methodically because I keep paper trails for everything. My mother's first reaction was not what I expected. I had expected shock, then concern, then a plan. What I got was, "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" I showed her the documentation again. She said she just meant that Tyler had really turned his life around. You could see it. The blog, the channel, he was doing so well. I said, "Because I paid his debt. That is what he turned around from. A situation I resolved." She was quiet. Then, "Why did you not tell us at the time?" And there it was. The conversation had been quietly rotated, so that I was now the one with something to explain. I had come to them with evidence of a deception that was growing into something harmful, and within 4 minutes my mother had found the angle from which I was the problem. My father sat at the table and said almost nothing. He looked at the documents. He looked at my mother. He looked at his hands. He was doing the thing he did, the careful absence of position that had allowed him to maintain relationships with everyone in the family at the cost of never standing fully in any of them. My mother's final position, delivered gently and with genuine love and zero usefulness, was that I should not do anything right now. That Tyler was finally doing well. That rocking this boat would hurt him. That sometimes the kindest thing was to let people have their stories. I drove home and sat with Fig on my lap and thought about kindness and stories and whether my mother had ever once applied that same philosophy to me. For months I said nothing. I watched the YouTube channel grow. I watched the blog posts get more specific and more confident. I watched Tyler develop a persona that was equal parts self-help coach and financial advisor, built entirely on an experience he had not had. I noticed extended family members engaging, liking posts, sharing videos, asking him questions in the comments with the particular trust that comes from believing you are getting advice from someone who has actually been through the thing. And then I heard about Aunt Carol and Uncle Pete. They were my mother's older sister and her husband. Retired. Fixed income. The kind of careful, quiet lives built over decades of modest saving. Aunt Carol had mentioned to my mother that she had been watching Tyler's videos and found them very helpful. Uncle Pete had asked Tyler directly in a comment about a specific investment strategy Tyler had been discussing, one that was not appropriate for people in their financial situation. Higher risk, longer time horizon, the kind of thing that makes sense at 30 with decades ahead and makes very little sense at 67 with a fixed income and no ability to recover from losses. Tyler had responded to Uncle Pete with confidence and encouragement. He said the strategy was sound if you believed in the long game. He said the people who told you it was too risky were the same people who never built anything. I called Aunt Carol. I was careful. I did not tell her about the debt. I just said that the strategy Tyler was discussing was one I would want her to look at with a licensed financial advisor before making any decisions. I said I knew Tyler meant well, but his experience was different from theirs. Aunt Carol was warm and slightly puzzled and told me that Tyler had actually already mentioned that some people in the family might try to discourage her. That it was a common response from people who had not done the work to understand the strategy. That she appreciated my concern but trusted Tyler's process. He had preemptively inoculated her. Against me. I sat with that for a day. Then I started making a different kind of plan. My grandmother was turning 80 that fall. The family was throwing a party at my parents' house. The big kind, with rented tables and catering and a slideshow of photos that my cousin Maya had been assembling for months. All the extended family would be there. Tyler would be there. Aunt Carol and Uncle Pete would be there. I made sure I knew where the laptop was. The one connected to the screen for Maya's slideshow. The party was, up until the moment it wasn't, a genuinely lovely evening. My grandmother was radiant in the particular way that people are radiant when they are 80 and surrounded by everyone they love and fully understand what that means. Maya's slideshow ran beautifully. Decades of photographs. People laughed and cried in the warm way of families who are mostly okay with each other. Tyler was holding court near the food table. He had a small group around him, a couple of cousins, Uncle Pete, a family friend named Gary who had apparently been watching his channel. They were talking about finances, about markets, about the opportunity that most people were too scared to act on. Tyler had the glow of a man in his element, of someone who has found the version of himself that everyone around him validates. Aunt Carol drifted over. She had a small notebook. She had been writing things down. Tyler was talking about the specific investment strategy, the one I had called about, making it sound simple and inevitable, and Aunt Carol was nodding with the trust of someone who believes she is getting inside information from a proven source. I said from across the table, "Aunt Carol, that particular strategy carries a lot more risk than it sounds. I would be careful with how much you put in." Tyler looked at me. The room shifted slightly. People register the moment when something moves from conversation to something else, and this had moved. He smiled. The particular smile of someone who has been waiting for the opposition to arrive because they have already prepared the answer to it. "Sarah," he said warmly, like he was explaining something to someone who meant well but did not quite understand. "I appreciate the concern. I really do." He paused. The pause was deliberate. "But with respect, your business went under and David left. Maybe investing advice is not really your lane." The room went very quiet. I looked at him. He was still smiling, but there was something underneath it. Something that had wanted to say that for a long time and had finally found its moment. He had taken my two most painful failures and deployed them in public to dismiss me in front of our entire family. I thought of Aunt Carol's notebook. I thought of the paper trail on my laptop sitting 10 feet away, still connected to the screen that had just shown 80 years of my grandmother's life. And I stood up. "You want to talk about financial decisions?" I said. "Okay. Let's talk about financial decisions." I walked to the laptop. The slideshow had ended, but the screen was still live. I opened my email, found the folder I had sent to myself 3 days earlier when I decided that this party was going to be the moment, and I connected it to the screen. The bank statements appeared behind me, projected large enough for everyone in the room to read. 3 years ago, I said, I paid off $47,000 of Tyler's credit card debt. I set up a fake debt forgiveness program so he would not know it came from me. Every bank statement, every confirmation, right there. I turned around and looked at the screen, and then I looked at the room. My grandmother had her hand over her mouth. Maya had gone completely still. Aunt Carol's notebook was closed. Uncle Pete was looking at the screen with the expression of a man recalculating something. My mother had tears on her face that she had not decided what to do with yet. My father was looking at Tyler. Tyler was looking at the floor. His face had done several things in those 5 seconds. Disbelief first, then something that was almost amusement, then the amusement collapsing as the screen went up, then something I had never seen on his face before in 29 years of looking at it. The face of a person watching the story they have been living inside suddenly develop walls. The discipline, I said, not loudly, not cruelly, just clearly. The journey, the blog, the book, that origin story, the rock bottom you climbed out of. It was my money. You did not climb out. I lifted you out and made it look like climbing. Nobody said anything. Tyler looked up at me once. Then he walked out of the room. I heard the front door a moment later. The party did not exactly continue and did not exactly end. It just dissolved. People moving quietly, conversations resuming in murmurs, my grandmother being gently guided to a chair. Aunt Carol put her notebook in her bag. Uncle Pete, before he left, put his hand briefly on my shoulder and did not say anything. He did not need to. My mother came to me later after most people had gone. She had stopped crying and had the look she gets when she is trying to be fair and finding it harder than expected. She said she wished I had found another way. I said I had tried to find another way and pointed out that she had been one of the ways I tried. She did not have an answer to that. She hugged me instead. It was not a nothing hug. I will give her that. My father found me in the kitchen while I was helping clean up. He stood next to me for a while, drying dishes without being asked. Then he said, Carol closed her notebook. Just that. And went back to drying dishes. It was, I realized, the most direct he had been about any family situation in years. The group chat was silent for 3 weeks. The silence was the kind that happens after something that cannot be undescribed. I sent one message at the end of the first week, a photo of Fig doing something ridiculous, and got 6 reactions but no replies. That was fine. I just wanted the chat to know I was still in it. Tyler posted nothing on his channel for 2 weeks. Then a video that was clearly about the situation without naming me or the party. He talked about facing hard truths about your story, about the difference between the narrative that helps you grow and the narrative that becomes a trap. It had a different quality than his other videos. Less performance, more actual uncertainty. I watched it twice. I did not comment. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday. My name on the envelope in the formal way of legal correspondence. A law firm return address I did not recognize. I opened it at my kitchen table with Fig watching me with the mild concern she directs at anything involving paper. Tyler was suing me. Defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The claim was that I had publicly presented false information designed to humiliate him and damage his professional reputation. There was language about harm to his brand, his business relationships, his mental and emotional well-being. I read it twice. Then I called Patricia, my lawyer from when I had closed the business. She read the letter while I was on the phone. I heard her go quiet. Then I heard something I had not expected. She laughed. Not meanly. She laughed in the way that lawyers laugh when they read something that is ambitious in inverse proportion to its viability. She said, "Sarah, truth is an absolute defense against defamation. You have the bank statements. You have the transfer confirmations. You have the paper trail. This case does not have legs. It does not even have ankles." I said, "Can you send that last sentence in a letter to his attorney?" She said she would handle it professionally, but yes, essentially. Here is what Tyler had not accounted for when he filed the lawsuit. He told people he was filing it. I do not know if it was impulse or strategy or the specific desperation that makes people need others to know they are fighting back. But he told the family. And the family, which had been sitting in uncertain silence for 3 weeks trying to figure out which way to land, now had to look at what Tyler had done with that silence. He had spent it suing his sister. My mother called me when she found out. Her voice had the careful quality she used when Tyler had done something she could not defend and had not yet figured out how to reframe. She said she did not think this was the right path. I told her I agreed, which seemed to surprise her. I told her I had a lawyer handling it and was not worried. She said she would talk to Tyler. Because the thing about filing a public lawsuit against your sister for showing bank statements you know to be accurate is that it requires people around you to do one of 2 things. Either agree that true information was somehow wrongly deployed, or acknowledge that you are trying to legally suppress the truth. And the extended family who had sat in that room and read those numbers on that screen had a harder and harder time with the first option. Aunt Carol sent me a message. Short, direct, a little formal in the way of someone who does not text much. She said she was glad she had not made any investments yet and that she thought I had done the right thing. I saved that message. Uncle Pete called Tyler directly. I know this because Tyler told me later. Pete had told him the lawsuit was making things worse and that he should let it go. Pete had been the person in that room most directly affected by what Tyler had been building, and Pete was now telling Tyler to stand down. That landed differently than anyone else saying it could have. Tyler's YouTube channel went quiet. The blog went quiet. The publisher who had expressed interest in the book, I do not know exactly what happened there, but the book did not proceed. Some things die in the silence that follows a public reckoning without anyone having to kill them. Patricia sent her letter. Tyler's attorney responded promptly, and without much fight. The suit was withdrawn within 3 weeks of filing. No court date, no formal proceedings, gone. The withdrawal was not announced in the family group chat. It just stopped being a thing that was happening. But everyone knew. In families, things like that circulate through a text here and a phone call there and a conversation at a kitchen table that gets mentioned at another kitchen table. And with the lawsuit gone and the silence stretching and the channel dark and the family having quietly redistributed its positions around the truth that the screen had shown, Tyler was left somewhere he had never been in his life. Alone with the consequence. No soft landing. No one rushing to tell him it was fine. No reframing that made him the victim. Just the fact of what he had built and then defended, sitting in front of him with nowhere else to go. I want to be honest about what those months were like for me because I do not want this to sound easier than it was. The lawsuit had been stressful even knowing I would win. Legal threats carry a weight that does not care whether you are in the right. The family silence was its own kind of grief. I miss Tyler in the specific way you miss someone who is still alive and present in the world, who you could call if things were different, who you have spent 29 years accumulating inside jokes with and who is now simply not there in any functional sense. I kept going to work. I kept going to the gym out of spite. I kept Fig fed and talked to. I started writing in a journal for the first time since I was a teenager, which helped more than I expected. For months after the party, on a Sunday evening in February when I was making soup and listening to something on the radio, my doorbell rang. Tyler was standing on the other side of it. He looked like someone who had made a decision and was still deciding whether it had been the right one. Not broken, not begging, not performing remorse. Just standing there with the specific quality of a person who has something to say and has been rehearsing it long enough that he is no longer sure which version is the real one. I let him in. I finished making the soup because I needed something to do with my hands and also because I was not going to stop making soup just because my brother had showed up. I made 2 bowls and we sat at my kitchen table the way we had sat at our parents' kitchen table 1,000 times growing up, and I let him talk. He talked for a long time. He talked about the pressure and not as an excuse. He said that word specifically. He said, "I am not saying this as an excuse," and I believed him, which is the thing that made it possible to actually hear it. He talked about what it had felt like to grow up being the one everyone loved without anyone expecting anything real from him. How that love had always felt slightly contingent on staying in a lane. How the debt had accumulated in part because he had been spending his way into the life the golden child was supposed to have, without the income to actually support it. He talked about what the debt forgiveness had felt like, how real the transformation had been, how genuinely his habits had changed, how he had built the blog and the channel partly out of wanting to make the story mean something. To make the crisis he thought he had survived into something that justified the suffering. "I think I believed it," he said. "That is the thing I keep sitting with. I think somewhere I actually convinced myself. I thought about the difference between a lie you tell other people and a lie you tell so many times it gets into the walls and becomes part of the architecture." "Why the lawsuit?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I was scared," he said. "And I thought if I went hard enough people would think there was something to fight for. That people would side with me." He paused. "They did not." "No," I said. "Pete called me," he said. "I know," I said. He looked at Fig, who had wandered over and was examining him with the clinical detachment of a cat deciding whether someone is worth her time. She apparently decided he was because she jumped onto the chair next to him, which I had never seen her do with anyone except me and my sister Emma. "How much do I owe you?" he asked. I told him the number. The full amount with the interest it would have earned in a low-risk account over 3 years, because I am who I am and I had the calculation ready. He looked at the number for a moment. Then he said, "I cannot give you all of it right now, but I want to pay it back. Actually pay it back." He named a monthly amount, not large but real and coming from him unprompted. "I want a record. A real one." I said okay. He said, "Are we okay?" I thought about it honestly. I thought about the party and the lawsuit and the years of watching and the $200 Emma had paid for a consultation and the notebook Aunt Carol had almost filled with dangerous advice. I thought about Tyler at the dinner table growing up, charming and effortless and slightly careless, and me beside him being the one who would be fine. And I thought about the soup on the stove that I had made enough of for 2 people before I even knew he was coming, like some part of me had been expecting this, or at least hoping for it. "We will be," I said. He nodded. He ate his soup. Fig stayed on the chair beside him the whole time. When he left, we hugged at the door. Not dramatically, not a hug from a movie. Just the real kind, a little awkward, a little longer than a casual goodbye. The kind that says we are still here and we know it. I closed the door and stood in my kitchen for a while. I never told anyone about the lawsuit being withdrawn. I did not announce it, did not put it in the group chat, did not call my mother to report it. Some things you let land without narrating them. Tyler does not have a YouTube channel anymore. He has a regular job now, back to something he had actually trained for years ago before the lifestyle creep took over. He has been paying me back every month on time with a small note in the transfer that just says thank you, which I did not ask for and find, if I am being honest, quietly overwhelming every single time. The family group chat is active again. My grandmother sends photos of her garden. Emma sends memes that are too young for her. My father occasionally forwards weather reports for reasons no one has ever explained. Tyler sends things sometimes, not financial content, just regular things. A photo of something funny he saw. A link to an article he thought I would like. Last month he sent me an article about event planning companies making a comeback with a note that just said, "You should consider it." I told him I would think about it. I am still thinking about it. If this one hit different for you, and I think it did, you know what to do. Subscribe to the Story Zone. Drop a like, and tell me in the comments. At what moment did you fully understand why Sarah did what she did at that party? We will see you in the next one.